What doesn't kill you, I mean, just makes you funnier. And that is the mantra of Zara Swindles Grosser, a comedian who has a one-woman show at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, which opens at the end of this month. And Zara wants to hear from you. If you've got a story of a bad thing that happens, but there's a funny side to it. You can find a way of making it funny, or someone else can. Someone else might say something you wish you'd thought of. So we invite your calls, 1300 22 55 76. What's the worst thing that ever happened to you and the funniest thing you or anyone else said about it? That's what I want you to think about it. That's what I want you to think about. When have you laughed in the face of adversity? 1300 22 55 76. I'm saying it a lot. I want you to ring. But in the meantime, welcome Zara to Life Matters.
Thanks so much, Richard. It's lovely to be here.
When did you first realise this, that sad, bad could also mean funny?
Oh, look, it probably wasn't that many years ago. When my dad died, that news is always shocking. I don't think any of us are ever particularly prepared for it. And I remember I was in Perth at the time and my sister rang me and said, he's gone. And I found myself on my knees in my lounge room crying, as you do. But the first thing that came out of my mouth was a little bit of levity. And we had been helping Dad out with his rent for a few years. And the first thing I said was, oh, well, at least we'll save some cash. Now, there was a pause in the conversation. We both laughed. And, you know, it wasn't to be disrespectful to the situation because it was already serious enough. It was already heartbreaking. But it kind of showed me that humour gives us something to hold on to in our most tragic moments in life.
Yeah, I really agree with you. And my own dad died a long time ago. I was a very young man, and I'm the oldest, so my younger sister was only 11 when this happened. And of course it was a tragedy for our family. But in the car, between the church and the graveyard, the cemetery that day, we were laughing.
Yeah. It's the human capacity to cope. You know, and we often say, if you can joke, you can cope. Now, it's going to get back to being serious again and you're going to have to deal with a whole lot of logistics and pain. But essentially, it just reminds us of our humanity and that we're going to get through this. I've got a friend of mine who was in an accident a few years back. She was just working one Saturday and a car hit her and actually amputated her leg at the site. So in that moment, she lost her leg.
Wow.
And, you know, for most people, losing a leg, that would be, you know, a fairly monumental experience in your life that could really take you down, you know, a negative path where perhaps you feel sorry for yourself. But not Michelle. So not only did she learn to walk with a prosthetic, she then started to jog again. Jog, that's right.
Yes.
Then she thought, I wonder if I could compete. And she started to enter into competitions here in Australia. She became an Australian champion. And now she's on her way to the London Paralympics in 2012. And I said to her, is there any upside to this, apart from the fact that you're now an Olympian, you know, potential Olympian?
You never would have been one before.
No, she wouldn't have been, actually. But she said there is an upside to having only one leg, you know, half-price waxing. So there's humour in everything if we allow ourselves, if we give ourselves permission to put the funny goggles on and look for it.
Sometimes it takes a while, though, doesn't it? I mean, you, on that day when you heard your father died, that was quick. And that is the sort of thing that a comedian would say. But many situations and for many people, it's going to take more distance to find the funny.
It does. Well, they say that, you know, good comedy is really, you know, circumstance or adversity plus time, essentially. And things do take time. I met a woman a little while ago who just had some tragic circumstances. She lost 4 of her family members in the space of a month, and then she herself got cancer and she lost her hair, she lost her eyebrows, but she never lost her sense of humour. And I said, how did you cope? And she said, well, I used to go into work every day and essentially I would draw my eyebrows on.
Right.
So each day she would draw on different eyebrows. Yeah, so some days she'd do very, you know, high clown brows and walk around the office going, hey, what's going on? Surprised by everything. Some days she'd come in with a monobrow. Some days she'd, you know, if she wasn't particularly happy, she'd draw in big, angry, you know, John Howard style.
John Howard out of control
eyebrows.
Yeah,
that's right.
Before the grooming people got to him.
Well, that's it. And what it did was it showed her that everyone around her, that it was okay to laugh. It was okay to have a giggle about this. And in fact, I believe that that's what got her through that terrible, terrible time. You know, we teach humour in the workplace as a concept and we define it very simply. It's really not about comedy per se, but we define it as keeping a light-hearted frame of mind regardless of the circumstances. So It's very easy to cope when things are going well.
Yes.
When you need humour is when things aren't going well.
And on a smaller scale than a tragedy. But I always think, if I'm having a particularly bad day or even a bad week, occasionally I think, this is going to make a good story later.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm married to an Irish woman who tells stories all the time, and that's one of the things I've learned from her, is that there's always a good story. If something bad happens, there's a good story.
Always. I was thinking about this last night, actually. I was thinking, when was the first time I realised that there was power in humour? You know, and I believe in it because it's literally the one thing that we can enjoy and utilise until our dying breath. So we may lose our good looks. Sorry to break that to you now, Richard, but we may lose our good looks, our social status, you know, our house, all of that. But if we protect it and if we cultivate it and if we love it, our sense of humour is something that we can have forever and ever. And I was thinking about the first time I realised there was power in humour, and I was actually 5 years old. And I was asked to be in the local production of Humpty Dumpty as the title character. I was a chubby kid, so I think it was the only costume that actually fit. And at the end, I was supposed to fall off the wall. And I remember thinking during that production, while the audience was full, I'm not going to fall off the wall tonight.
Oh.
And so the teacher had to come on stage and stop the production and talk to the audience and say, I'm sorry, this is where Humpty is supposed to fall off the wall. And she turned to me and said, you know, Humpty, you know, why aren't you falling? And I looked at the audience and said, I don't like scrambled eggs. And the audience laughed. 300 people broke up and I went, I like this.
That's
and
good.
It's very easy. And that's what humour does. It kind of diffuses tension, it unites people, it gets everyone looking at the same thing at the same time, in the same way.
I like that. What it does occur to me, though, is what an enlightened school you must have gone to. Because certainly when I went to school, if the Humpty Dumpty didn't fall off the wall at the appropriate time, some teacher would have nudged them from behind.
Yeah, you've got to be pushed, that's right. Yeah. That's right. I think she wanted to, just quietly.
On Life Matters today, if you've got something bad or bad or sad that happened to you, but you've got a funny story, either you thought of it or someone else did, get in touch. I don't know if we've got any callers yet. We might do. Yes, we do. We have Ian in New South Wales. Ian, good morning. Hello.
Very briefly, I was in the military and I was on some leave and going up north to see my aunties. This was 1978, and I went through the windscreen at 160 miles an hour, kilometres an hour. And after I woke up out of the coma, etc., my frontal lobe damage was that I couldn't put two and two together because of that damage. And when I eventually got home, I was, I'd go to the pub and they used to start singing the Beatles' Nowhere Man, because from one moment to the next, I wouldn't remember what I'd done.
Right.
And even up to now, 30 years later, they call me the Groundhog Day man, and so I laugh and put it in perspective, and and that gets me through the day because I'm still writing notes down all over the place. And the funniest thing is, I get down the bottom of the stairs and jump in the car and forget all the notes, and I go shopping anyway, bring home half the things I didn't need anyway.
So you can surprise yourself that way, can't you?
Yeah, that's right. It's very funny, yeah.
Thank you very much for calling.
Thank you.
Marion, also in New South Wales, there was a miniskirt incident, I understand.
Oh.
Yes, indeed. Am I online? I'm not
You are?
sure.
No,
Yes.
you're on air. You're going out across the country. We're all waiting to hear about the miniskirt.
Oh, okay. Well, long ago in the days when miniskirts were very new and very provocative, my boyfriend and I were getting dressed up in our very bestest and most glamorous glad rags to go off to a very special party.
Mm-hmm.
So we got ourselves togged out and went down to meet with our friends at the pub before we went off to the party. And I thought I looked very, very special. And as we came in, it was actually relating to my boyfriend's his graduation. So as we came in, all the people raised their glasses and then put them down quietly, and one of my friends stood up and said, Marion, I should say, Rob is my boyfriend, Marion, I don't think so. I think maybe you should go back home and think again about your skirt. So one of the other people in the party, knowing how embarrassed I felt and how humiliating it was, said, well, at least, Marion, you can pull it off. And my boyfriend very valiantly stepped forward and said, no, my dear, that's going to be my pleasure.
Thank you very much for that, Marion. Let's squeeze in Polly. She's in Sydney. Hello, Polly.
Hi, Richard.
Now,
I've got a story about my father, who was always 2 hours early for any appointment. If I was leaving Melbourne, he left the Blue Mountains and got to Sydney before we left Melbourne.
Right.
When he died in Geraldton, and he was cremated over there, and Geraldton sent the ashes to Perth to send them to Sydney. They sent them back to Geraldton. They sent them back to Perth, and he didn't get to his funeral. And at his funeral,
was he late?
He didn't get there.
He wasn't even there at all.
No, he didn't even get there. And my brother said, "Oh, gee, poor old Dad, you know, didn't get to his own funeral."
Thanks, Polly.
Okay.
There's some great lines about people finishing off in life, aren't there, Zara? You know, Oscar Wilde's reputed to have said either this wallpaper goes or I do, just before he went. And somebody else famous, and I wish I could remember who, was being asked where they would be, where do you want to be buried? And they were very ill, they were dying. He said, surprise me. We might squeeze in one more. Very briefly, Denise, how are you going?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, Richard?
I'm really well. Now, you want to talk about something that happened in a hospital?
Indeed, I have two very quick hospital stories, and unfortunately both surrounding death. But I must first get the guarantee from your guest that she won't use them, because my son is an up-and-coming stand-up, and they're his.
All artists borrow and great artists steal, Denise. Off you go.
That's right, we call it a tribute.
Indeed. The first was some years ago. My grandmother had just died in a hospital room, and we were all gathered, and we were obviously shocked. And my sister ran out into the hallway and called for help, and this young intern was passing, and he walked into the room and looked at us all and said, "Hasn't she been well lately?" It wasn't a laugh out loud moment.
No.
If you've got another one, you have to hurry.
Okay. This is very sad because it concerns a friend of ours who is in fact suffering from cancer currently and is in a hospice, and we went in to see him recently, and he's lying flat on a bed, and in order to talk to us, he needed to be wound up. So my husband went up and wound this arm that made him sit up, and we enjoyed our visit. And as we were leaving, my husband went over to him and said, "Stan, would you like us to put you down?"
Oh, dear. And on that note...
Stan said, "Oh, give us a day or two."
Yes, indeed. Crikey. Wouldn't mind something else to eat first. Thank you very much for that, Denise.
Thank you.
I've got with me, and we have to wrap this up now, but Zara Swindles Gross is at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, which runs from the 30th of this month until the 21st.
That's right.
Or watch out, because you do conferences and things, don't you?
We do indeed. The show's called Zara and Zara in Zara with Troy, a one-woman show. And you can book it at 3dcomedy.com.au /Zara.
All right. Thank you very much for coming in.
It's great to be
here,
Richard.
Great.